Breaking news coming out of Algeria. The president, Abdelaziz Bouteflika, has resigned. Well, Calvin Dark is an international affairs analyst. He joins us via Skype from Washington, D.C. Sir, thank you for joining us here on Al Jazeera. Because of the pressure that had been put on the streets of Algeria with demonstrations lasting weeks, the president had already said that he was going to step down by the 28th of April. Why do you think we've had this slight change of heart where we see him resigning straight away?
Well, I think what it definitely shows for the optimists like me out there, and even for the cynics, that peaceful public protest and pressure can really move things, particularly in the social media age where a lot of the protests were not only broadcast outside of Algeria, but the situation unfolded before our eyes on social media. So I think it's definitely it's a function of the pressure that was put on the Bouteflika entourage.
A lot of the protesters that we've spoken to and that we hear about on social media have very clearly said that it wasn't really just about the president himself. It was a whole host of people around him who they see as an elite, who they see as out of touch, certainly much older than the average population of Algeria. So what impact do you think his actual resignation, whether it happens now or in 4 weeks, will have on the protests?
Well, I think that this will be a major victory for the protesters. But let me tell you what kind of unsettles me, and I was thinking about this particularly over the last few days, is while the protests have been pretty clear in what they did not want, they haven't exactly said what they do want. And as you'll notice, there's been a huge mobilization of protesters, but there hasn't been an opposition figure to put a face to it. So the problem is if that face of this opposition isn't identified, then you're probably going to have members of Bouteflika's entourage who will assume power. And let's be honest, with Bouteflika's help, it will be, if that happens, that'll be the same people who've been running Algeria for the last 5 years.
Where do you see the role of the army in all of this? Because last week, the army chief of staff had actually demanded that the president be declared unfit to rule. So what do you see as their role, what it could be in days and weeks to come?
Well, I think in general, it just basically underscores what most people who study and work and live in Algeria have known for years, and that is that it's the military that really holds the power. And I think that as you watch the protest over the last 5-6 weeks, everybody was saying, well, where does the military stand? Because in a very practical way, until they made a move, nothing was going to move. And so when that support amongst the military elites started to deteriorate for Bouteflika, that is what actually put things in motion. So I think it's a signal that things are definitely changing. It'll be interesting to see if the protesters can articulate exactly what that change should look like.
What actually kicked all of this off was the elections, and when Bouteflika said he was actually going to stand again. Now, that's what kind of kicked off the protests. But the issue is that now, actually, the elections have been postponed. How crucial is it for you, do you think, for the elections to be reinstated, for a date to be given, and I guess perhaps to see some fresh faces for the people to choose from?
I think that definitely, I think by the Constitution, the way that they've gone with Article 102, it's going to be 90 days with the chairman of one of the houses of parliament, Ben Salah, will kind of lead this transition. But what is key is that a date certain has been set up and that the opposition and the protesters designate who they want to be a part of that new government. Because you know what? If there's not a date certain that's set, and if there's no opposition leader or a younger face, you could be looking at an indefinite postponement of elections led by the same people who've been leading in the background for the last 5 years.
Which is obviously exactly what the protesters don't want. Calvin Dark, international affairs analyst, joining us from Washington. Sir, thank you.
Thank you.